Welcome back to Uncommon Christianity. And in our last episode, we went down to the potter's house with Jeremiah and we saw the clay upon the wheel and hands of the potter shaping the vessel. And we established an important truth: the potter shapes, but the clay must remain yielded. Today, I want to look at another part of that shaping process. Because when we study the men and women of God that God used throughout the scripture, we discover something remarkable. Very often, before there was a public moment, there was a hidden season. Before Moses stood before Pharaoh, there was Midian. Before David stood before Goliath and eventually sat upon the throne, there were sheep. Before Joseph stood before Pharaoh, there were years of slavery and imprisonment. And before John the Baptist appeared to Israel, there was a desert. There were years when these people were largely unseen. And yet, those years mattered. I call this the school of obscurity. Let's consider Moses. The first 40 years of his life were spent in Pharaoh's house. Acts 7 tells us Moses learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds. In Acts 7:22, where that's recorded, it is stipulating that Moses had education, Moses had position, Moses had access, and he had been raised within one of the most powerful civilizations on earth. But then everything changed. After killing an Egyptian, Moses fled. Well, where did he go? He went to Midian. The man raised in Pharaoh's house, he became a shepherd, and years passed. Then in Exodus 3, it tells us, now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. Now think about that change. From Pharaoh's house to watching sheep, from prominence to obscurity, from the center of Egyptian power to the backside of a desert. And it was there that God called him from the burning bush. Now, Moses may have thought his significant years were behind him, but the greatest work of his life had not even begun. Then there's David. When Samuel came to the house of Jesse to anoint the future king, David was not even initially brought before him. Samuel looked at Jesse's sons. One after another passed before him, and finally Samuel asked, he said, "Are here all your children?" Well, Jesse answered and said, "No, there remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep." David was out with the sheep, hidden. But something was happening there. David later tells Saul that while he was keeping his father's sheep, a lion came. Then a bear came. David defended the flock. Nobody was building a platform for him. Nobody knew that these encounters were preparing him for Goliath. But when Goliath appeared, David already had a history with God. The battlefield revealed what had been developed in obscurity. Now, Joseph's story is different. His obscurity was not chosen. He was betrayed by his brothers. He was sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned, and then forgotten by a man he had helped. Genesis tells us that after Joseph interpreted the chief butler's dream, yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph? No, but forgot him. No, that's what a sentence. Joseph was forgotten. But he was not finished. 2 more years passed. Then Pharaoh had a dream. And suddenly the man who had been forgotten in prison was exactly the man who was needed in the palace. And when Joseph was brought before Pharaoh, he was ready. Again, we see the principle. The moment of usefulness arrives after the years of preparation. Remember John the Baptist? He gives us perhaps one of the clearest statements of this principle. Luke tells us the child grew and waxed strong in spirit, was in the deserts till the day of his showing unto Israel. That's in Luke 1. Now, I love those words because it says, till the day of his showing unto Israel. There was going to be a day that John would appear and he would preach. Crowds would come. He would prepare the way of the Lord. But before the day of his showing, there were years in the desert. We know very little about those years. Scripture does not give us like a daily record, and perhaps that itself teaches us something. Some of the most important preparation in a person's life may happen during years about which there is very little to say publicly. Now, we can make a mistake here. We can think that if nobody sees what we're doing, nothing important is happening. But obscurity and inactivity are not the same thing. David was working. Moses was working. Joseph was serving faithfully even in prison. And John was growing and becoming strong in spirit. The hidden place was active. And this connects directly to our shepherd's bag. Remember the stones? The fact that they were hidden did not mean they had lost their value. They were prepared, they were ready, and they were available. And the master knew exactly where they were. Obscurity also tests our motives. We will be faithful when nobody notices. Will we pursue Christ when there is no audience? Will we study his word when nobody is asking us to teach? Will we develop character when there is no position attached to it? Will we serve people who can do nothing for us? Will we remain obedient when faithfulness brings no recognition? These questions reveal something very important. Do we want to be vessels unto honor because we love the master? Or because we want the master to give us something visible to do? And there is a difference. If our faithfulness depends upon recognition, then recognition has become part of our reward. But the vessel of unto honor says, whether I am seen or unseen, I belong to the master. And there's another danger in seasons of obscurity, because we can be patient. We can try to create our own opportunity. Because when our patience turns to impatience, that's when we could attempt to do that. And David gives us an extraordinary example of refusing to do that. Because he had already been anointed to become king, yet Saul was still sitting upon the throne. And more than once, David had opportunity to kill Saul. And he could have reasoned, well, God promised me the kingdom. Here's my opportunity. But David refused to seize through his own hand what had been promised concerning his future. He waited. That required enormous restraint. Sometimes preparation means learning not only how to act, it means learning when not to act. There are doors we do not have to force open. There are positions we do not have to manufacture. There are opportunities we do not have to manipulate. Our responsibility is to remain faithful. But we need an important balance here. We should not teach that every hidden season, because that can be the error, thinking that obscurity guarantees public use. That would just simply turn obscurity into another path towards ambition. Not every Moses is called to confront Pharaoh. Not every David is called to a throne. Not every believer will be known by thousands of people. And that is perfectly consistent with being a vessel unto honor. Remember what we established at the beginning of this series. The master determines the use of the vessel. Our responsibility is readiness. Some of the most honorable vessels in the house of God may live entire lives of faithfulness known to very few people. Their work may happen within a family, within a local congregation, a neighborhood, just within a friendship, quiet acts of generosity, a conversation that no one hears. The size of an audience does not determine the honor of the vessel. Faithfulness does. What are we becoming while we wait? So perhaps the question during the hidden season should not always be, when will this season end? Perhaps the better question is, when am I becoming when I'm here? Moses learned in Midian, David learned among the sheep, Joseph learned through suffering, and John grew strong in spirit in the desert. There may be things Christ desires to develop within us that cannot be rushed. So patience, humility, and endurance, compassion, discernment, self-control, faithfulness, a deeper knowledge of Scripture, a greater dependence upon God. These things cannot always be produced quickly. Some things require years. And that brings us back to the brook. The stone did not become smooth because water touched it once. Preparation involved process. The brook prepared the stone. The bag preserved its readiness. And the hidden years formed the servant. And when the moment of usefulness came, what had been developed in obscurity became visible. So if you presently find yourself in a season where very little seems to be happening, do not automatically conclude that the season has no purpose. Remain faithful. Continue learning. Continue purging. Continue fleeing. Continue following. Continue yielding to the potter. And above all, remain ready. Because our responsibility is not to determine when the master will use a vessel. Our responsibility is to maintain the condition of honor. And that brings us naturally to our next question. What does the condition actually look like? What are the marks by which we can examine our own lives and recognize whether we are becoming vessels unto honor? Purity, humility, faithfulness, obedience, a servant's heart. These are not merely admirable Christian qualities. They are characteristics that make a vessel increasingly trustworthy and useful. And that is where we're going to go next. In episode 7, the marks of a vessel of honor. Until next time, let Christ be seen in you, and please stay safe.